All right, so a new set of questions. Let's discuss those questions. The first is F1. F1 is
Sure, go
for,
ahead and share the new set of questions.
I just shared you the set of new set of questions. F1, the first question, F1 is for, um, high low vowels is the correct answer. High
F1 is
low.
for distinguishing high-low vowels in phonetics. It refers to the first formant frequency, which helps in identifying the vowel's height.
Uh, So F1 is for high low vowels. So did you get that new set of questions?
Yes, F1 relates to the height of vowels, distinguishing high from low vowels.
Uh, that's what I want to discuss, right? So F1 is for high low vowels.
Got it. F1, or the first formant, is crucial for identifying vowel height. In the vowel space, F1 represents how high or low the tongue is in the mouth. For example, a high vowel like has a low F1, while a low vowel like has a high F1. This is how F1 helps distinguish between vowel heights.
F1 is for high low vowels. Now F2 is for front back vowels. So F1 is for high low
Exactly.
vowels.
F2, or the second formant, helps determine the front-back position of vowels. High F2 values indicate front vowels like E, while low F2 values indicate back vowels like OO. So F1 and F2 together help us pinpoint the exact vowel sound.
So F1 is for high low vowels like E, and F2 is for front back vowels like oo, or.
Actually, F1 relates to the high-low dimension of vowels, so lower F1 values correspond to high vowels like E, and higher F1 values correspond to low vowels like F2, on the other hand, deals with the front-back dimension, where higher F2 values correspond to front vowels like E, and lower F2 values correspond to back vowels like OO.
Cool. Now, fricative affricate belongs to fricative affricate belongs to the articulatory phonetics. The next, so fricative and affricate, these are two manners of pronunciation, manner, a place of art. So yeah, manner of articulation. So they are of course going to belong to articulatory phonetics, not acoustic and not auditory phonetics, not combinatory phonetics as well. Now, the next is the mutual exclusiveness of a pair of sounds in a certain phonetic environment. So, mutual exclusiveness of a pair of sounds in a certain phonetic environment is called complementary distribution. And a complementary distribution, as we know, as complementary distribution is basically when two sounds cannot be present in one in one position, but these belong to the same phoneme. So for example, pa and fa, these cannot be present in the same environment, but these are necessary as they complete the whole picture. So for example, pa and fa are allophones of a phoneme, and by stating that these are allophones of the same phoneme, we mean that there are two parts of one aspect. There are two parts of one aspect, pa and fa, and these both need to be specified exactly where they occur in order to give a complete picture of the occurrence of the phoneme pa. Now, moving on to the next question. So, the functional relationship between two rules, where application of one rule prevents a feeding relationship, is termed as, so functional relationship between, so prevents the feeding relationship is termed as counter feeding relation, counter feeding ordering. and counterfeiting or ring. So counter bleeding or ring, bleeding or ring, we've already discussed all of those. But this is one thing to be remembered: functional relationship between two rules, where application of one rule prevents a feeding relationship, is termed not as bleeding relationship but counter feeding relationship. Now the next is sound segments are sonorant if they exhibit spontaneous voicing, right? Sound segments are sonorant if they exhibit spontaneous voicing. The second assertion: sound segments are sonorant if the suppression of air is below that of the level of glides. So the suppression of level of air in the production of sonorant sounds is below that of the level of the production of glides, like wa and ya, and sonorants are like vowel sounds. Um, so um, so, uh, so, so both of these assertions are correct actually. So the first assertion is that sound segments are sonorant if they exhibit spontaneous voicing, right? So explain, what these two assertions really want to state with examples. So do not be too elaborate. Keep it a little concise, but provide me with the relevant examples which showcase that these two statements in the real world situation can be observed. So go ahead and do that.
Sure. The two assertions are about sonorant sounds. First assertion: sound segments are sonorant if they exhibit spontaneous voicing. Sonorant sounds, like vowels and nasals, are characterized by a continuous airflow in voicing. For example, the vowel ah in father or the nasal in man are sonorants because they involve vocal cord vibration and have a free flow of air. Second assertion: sound segments are sonorant if the suppression of air is below that of the level of glides. In terms of airflow, sonorants like vowels are produced with less constriction compared to glides like and ja. For instance, in we or jin yes have less airflow restriction compared to vowels like in si. So both assertions are correct, as they describe how sonorant sounds are produced with spontaneous voicing and less constriction compared to glides.
Now, can you prepare an anecdote? A little one, an anecdote which has this story of sound segments, the sonorant sound segments, and in those sonorant sounds, the suppression of air is actually below that of the level of glides, with some practical real world scenario. So for example, how to measure the difference between the two, like the sonorants and the others, like sonorants and glides. So measuring the sonorants and the glides, but that instrument which is being used to measure shows that the sonorants in the sonorants, the suppression of air is below that of the level of glides.
Imagine a speech scientist named Alex who is studying how different sounds are produced. Alex is using a special instrument called a spirometer to measure airflow during speech. One day, Alex decides to compare sonorants and glides. They start by measuring airflow while pronouncing a sonorant vowel like ah in father, and then switch to a glide like oo in we. The spirometer shows that when Alex says the airflow is relatively smooth and continuous, with minimal constriction. In contrast, when Alex says ooh, the airflow shows a bit more constriction, even though it's still not as blocked as consonants. Through this simple test, Alex notices that the airflow suppression during the production of A is indeed lower compared to W, just as the theory suggests. This hands-on experiment helps Alex illustrate how sonorants have a more open airflow compared to glides, confirming the theoretical observations about sound production.
All right, moving on to the next question. So, when all the affixes are taken out of the English word ungrammaticality, the remainder is called a root, right? Grammar, that would be the final element left after taking out all the affixes of the English word ungrammaticality. Is that not correct?
That's right. When you remove all the affixes from ungrammaticality, the part that's left is grammatical. This part is called the root. So yes, root is the term for the remainder after affixes are removed.
All right, moving on to the next question. So, a branch of morphology that usually takes what is called an item and process approach. So, a branch of morphology which takes item and process approach instead of analyzing a word form as a set of morphemes arranged in a sequence. A word form is regarded as the result of applying rules which alter a word form or stem in order to produce a new one is called lexeme based morphology. Now, I want you to elaborate what item and process model is. I want you to elaborate what item and process model is, firstly.
The item and process model in morphology focuses on how word forms are created and changed through rules. Instead of breaking words down into a sequence of individual morphemes, this approach looks at how rules apply to word stems to transform them into new forms. In this model, item refers to the base or stem of the word. Process refers to the rules or mechanisms that modify this base to produce different word forms. For example, in English, adding ed to walk creates walked. Here, walk is the item, and the process is the rule that adds ed to indicate past tense. So, the item and process model examines how these rules are applied to stems, rather than just listing morphemes in sequence.
So, what does this statement really mean? Give me a simple explanation followed by a complex explanation.
Simple explanation. The item and process model looks at how we change a base word using rules. Instead of just stacking parts together, it focuses on how adding or changing parts of a word changes its meaning or form. For example, turning play into played involves a rule adding -ed applied to the base word play. Complex explanation. The item and process model in morphology provides a framework for understanding word formation by focusing on the processes that alter a base form or stem. Unlike models that analyze words as a sequence of morphemes, this model considers how morphological rules apply to stems to produce new forms. For instance, the process of adding the suffix s to the stem book to form books illustrates how a grammatical rule indicating plurality transforms the base. This approach emphasizes the dynamic nature of word formation, where the application of rules can significantly change the word's structure and meaning, reflecting a more functional and process-oriented view of morphology.
So, what this statement really means is that word forms, they are actually not analyzed as a sequence of morphemes, but as a result of application of rules, and the application of those rules yields an output and produces a new word. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's correct. The statement means that instead of just breaking down a word into individual morphemes, the item and process model views word formation as the result of applying specific rules to a base form. These rules modify the base form to create a new word, focusing on how the rules function rather than just listing the morphemes.
So, this is called lexeme based morphology, correct?
Yes, that's right. Lexeme-based morphology is the branch of morphology that uses the item and process model. It emphasizes how rules are applied to base forms, or lexemes, to generate new word forms, rather than just analyzing a word as a sequence of morphemes.
So, what branch of morphology uses as okay? Let's talk about item and this is item and process approach. We also have something called item and paradigm or word and paradigm approach, something like that.
Yes, that's right. The item and paradigm approach is another branch of morphology. It focuses on analyzing word forms as specific items within a paradigm. Each word is viewed in relation to a set of related forms that it can take, like different verb conjugations or noun declensions. In contrast, the item and process approach, or lexeme-based morphology, looks at how rules are applied to a base form to produce different word forms.
So let's talk about item and paradigm approach. What is it really?
The item and paradigm approach focuses on analyzing words as part of a system of forms within a paradigm. In this approach, you look at each word as a unique item that belongs to a broader set of related forms. For example, in verb conjugation, a verb like run might have forms like runs, ran, and running. Each of these forms is analyzed individually but understood as part of a larger system or paradigm of verb forms. Essentially, this approach examines how each form fits into a broader pattern or system of variations, rather than looking at how rules transform a base form into different variations.
So, what branch of morphology uses the item and paradigm approach?
The item and paradigm approach is typically used in traditional morphology. This branch looks at words as part of a system of related forms or paradigms. It's often associated with more classical or descriptive methods of analyzing languages, where the focus is on listing and describing the different forms that a word can take within a given paradigm.
What does the paradigm, the word paradigm, literally mean?
The word paradigm literally means a model or pattern. In linguistics, it refers to a set of related word forms that show different grammatical features, like verb conjugations or noun declensions. It helps us understand how different forms of a word fit together within a language system.
All right, let's move on to the next question. So, the next is a hypothesis which entails that syntactic transformations operate on syntactic constituents only and can only insert or delete designated elements is is the lexicalist hypothesis. So, explain to me in detail what lexicalist hypothesis really is. Who proposed this hypothesis, and when did he propose this hypothesis? And then we'll move on to explaining how this statement about the lexicalist hypothesis relate with the lexicalist hypothesis.
The lexicalist hypothesis is a concept in syntax and morphology proposed by the linguist Maurice Halle and his collaborator Jean-Roger Vergniaud. It emerged prominently in the late 1970s and early 1980s. This hypothesis posits that syntactic transformations, which are changes in sentence structure, operate only on syntactic constituents, or major parts of sentences, and not on the internal structure of words. In other words, the hypothesis argues that the transformations we see in syntax affect only the arrangement of words and phrases, not the words themselves. For instance, in generating sentences, transformations like moving elements around don't alter the internal structure of words, but rather the structure of phrases and sentences. According to this hypothesis, the internal structure of words is handled separately by the lexical component of the grammar. Lexical items, words, are considered to have their own internal structure and rules, which are distinct from the syntactic rules that govern sentence structure. Thus, when transformations occur, they do not change the internal composition of words. They only affect how words and phrases are organized in sentences. In relation to the statement you mentioned, the lexicalist hypothesis implies that only designated elements within syntactic constituents are subject to transformations, and these transformations don't interfere with the internal structure of lexical items. This means that while transformations might reorder or modify constituents at the sentence level, they don't alter the underlying grammatical structure of individual words.
So, what does this hypothesis state in simple terms?
In simple terms, the lexicalist hypothesis says that changes in sentence structure, like reordering words, only affect how words and phrases are put together, not how the words themselves are built or structured. It suggests that the internal makeup of words stays the same, and only the arrangement of these words in sentences is changed.
So, what can I so lexicalist hypothesis lexicalist hypothesis, what is it? Can you repeat that in simpler terms?
Sure. The lexicalist hypothesis says that changes in how sentences are put together only affect the arrangement of words, not the words themselves. So the structure of words stays the same, but how we place them in sentences can change.
So, a hypothesis which entails that syntactic transformations operate on syntactic constituents only and can only insert or delete designated elements is the lexicalist hypothesis. How does this statement relate with the lexicalist hypothesis? And yes,
This statement reflects the core idea of the lexicalist hypothesis. It emphasizes that syntactic rules affect only the structure and order of words in a sentence, not the internal structure of the words themselves. In simpler terms, transformations deal with arranging words rather than altering the word's internal makeup.
so what does it mean when it is said that it can only it can only insert or delete designated elements?
When it's said that syntactic transformations can only insert or delete designated elements, it means that these rules can add or remove specific parts of a sentence or structure, but they don't change the fundamental structure of the words themselves. For example, a rule might add a word or remove a word in a sentence, but it won't change the internal parts of the words being used.
So can you elaborate the application of this statement and give me an example like something concrete, something understandable, something that can be seen in operation?
Sure, let's say we have the sentence, John is happy. According to the lexicalist hypothesis, transformations only adjust the sentence structure or add remove words, not alter the internal parts of the words. Consider a syntactic transformation like do support for forming questions in English. To transform John is happy into a question, you might add does to form is John happy. Here, the rule is about inserting the auxiliary is at the start and not about changing the structure of John or happy. So in this process, the lexicalist hypothesis implies that the transformation, like forming a question, operates on the sentence structure and words at the syntactic level, but doesn't alter the inherent form or internal structure of the words themselves.
So, what does the lexicalist hypothesis aim to explain? Can you like show me a problem and lexicalist hypothesis coming in with its proposal and its definitions and then solving that problem? Can you show me such a scenario?
Certainly. Let's use the example of verb morphology to illustrate how the lexicalist hypothesis works. Problem. In English, verbs can change forms to indicate tense, such as walk present and walked past. One problem is understanding how these tense changes happen in the syntax without altering the verb's internal structure. Lexicalist hypothesis proposal. The lexicalist hypothesis proposes that syntactic transformations work only on the structure of sentences and not on the internal structure of words. It states that any changes in word forms, like tense, are handled by the lexicon, the mental dictionary of words, and these changes are separate from syntactic transformations. Definitions. 1. Lexicalist hypothesis. This hypothesis suggests that transformations apply to sentence structures and not to the internal structure of words. Any modification in word forms happens within the lexicon, not through syntax. 2. Lexicon. The mental repository of word forms and their properties, such as tense. Solution. To apply the lexicalist hypothesis, consider the following sentence transformation. Original sentence, he walked to the store. To make this sentence grammatically correct in the past tense, we use the rule to change the verb form from walk to walked. 1. Lexical approach. According to the lexicalist hypothesis, the verb walk changes to walked, because this transformation occurs in the lexicon where tense changes are stored. The syntactic rule doesn't alter the internal structure of the verb. 2. Application. When forming the past tense, the lexical entry for walk is replaced with walked. The syntactic transformation applies to the sentence structure, not to the internal structure of the verb. So, the problem of transforming he walked to the store into the past tense is solved by changing the lexical entry for walk to walked, while keeping syntactic rules separate from this internal modification. The hypothesis helps explain that morphological changes like tense are handled by the lexicon, not by syntactic transformations.
Is there something called the Bayes rule Praecothesis?
It sounds like you might be referring to Bayes' rule and trichotomy, but Bayes' rule trichotis doesn't seem to be a standard term. Bayes' rule is a fundamental concept in probability theory and statistics used to update the probability of a hypothesis based on new evidence. A trichotomy generally refers to a division into three parts or categories, such as in mathematics or logic, where a relation might be divided into three distinct parts. If you're referring to a specific theory or concept combining these ideas, could you provide more details or clarify?
Well, one of the options given in the same question, about the lexicalist hypothesis is the Bayes rule Praecothesis. So, Praecothesis is spelled as Prykothesis. So, Bayes rule Praecothesis, what is this?
The term Bayes' rule praecothesis you mentioned might be a misspelling or a less common term. The closest related concept is Bayesian hypothesis, which involves using Bayes' rule in hypothesis testing or decision making. In a linguistic context, if the term is related to the lexicalist hypothesis, it might involve.
All right, let's move on. Doesn't work. I don't know what the fuck is wrong with this. All right, let's move on to the next question. It has two assertions. First, in grammar, clitic refers to a form which resembles a word, a word. The second, that in grammar, clitic refers to a form that is dependent on a neighboring word in a construction. So that resembles a word, and that is dependent on a neighboring word in a construction. I don't know. One is false, but two is true.
Let's break down these two assertions about clitics. One, the first assertion says that a clitic resembles a word. This is partially correct because clitics do look like words in terms of their form, but they don't function independently like typical words do. Two, the second assertion states that a clitic is dependent on a neighboring word in a construction. This is correct. Clitics are special because they rely on adjacent words to form a complete structure. They can't stand alone and need to attach to other words to convey their meaning. So the more accurate statement is the second one. Clitics are dependent on neighboring words to function properly in a sentence.
Now, the next question has again two assertions. The first, that an endocentric construction refers to a group of syntactically related words where one of the words is functionally equivalent to the group as a whole. True. Second assertion, that an exocentric construction refers to a group of syntactically related words where some words are functionally equivalent to the group as a whole. So that's not correct. So one is true, but two is false. Now moving on to the next one, it has two assertions again. First, that deixis subsumes those features of language which refer directly to the personal, temporal, or locational characteristics of the situation within which an utterance takes place. Second assertion, that the notion of deixis has proved fruitful in language acquisition studies where researchers view its acquisition or learning by the children as a significant feature of early language development. Now, both of these assertions are correct. Now, I want you to elaborate on the second assertion, which talks about deixis, the notion of deixis being helpful in language acquisition by children. So, which study was this found in? Like what study found that the acquisition of the notion of deixis is helpful in child language acquisition? Yes, I want you to explain that part.
The second assertion about deixis being significant in language acquisition focuses on how understanding deixis is crucial for children's early language development. Deictic expressions like pronouns, he, she, time adverbs, now, then, and location terms, here, there, help children anchor their speech to their immediate context. A key study in this area is the work of Jean Piaget, who explored how children understand and use these contextual references as they develop. Piaget's research on cognitive development showed that young children gradually learn to use deixis to relate language to their environment, which is crucial for effective communication. Additionally, more recent research, such as that by Elizabeth Bates and her colleagues, also highlighted how children's acquisition of deictic terms reflects their growing understanding of social and situational contexts. This acquisition is seen as a milestone in cognitive and linguistic development, illustrating how children's language use becomes more sophisticated as they grasp these contextual elements.
All right, now moving on to the next question. First assertion, a strong crossover occurs when the pronoun is in an argument position. That is, it is an argument of the relevant verb and is not contained inside a noun phrase. Now, please elaborate what this statement really means.
Sure. In syntactic theory, strong crossover refers to a specific kind of syntactic constraint on pronoun binding. In simpler terms, strong crossover occurs when a pronoun refers to a noun phrase, like him referring to John, but is placed in a position where it conflicts with the noun phrase it's supposed to refer to. This typically happens when the pronoun is in the argument position of a sentence and not embedded within another noun phrase. For example, consider the sentence, John, he thought that he would win. In this case, the pronoun he in he thought cannot refer to John because John is in the same argument position as the pronoun. According to the strong crossover principle, this creates a conflict because the pronoun he is not supposed to refer to John in such a structure. In contrast, if he were embedded inside another noun phrase, like John's idea that he would win, there would be no strong crossover violation, as the pronoun's reference would be clearer and less conflicting.
Can you elaborate the same thing in simpler terms?
Absolutely. Strong crossover is about how pronouns can and can't refer to other words in a sentence. In simple terms, strong crossover happens when a pronoun, like he or she, is placed in a spot in the sentence where it could cause confusion about who or what it's referring to. For example, if you say, John, he said that he would win, it's confusing because it's unclear if the he in he said is referring to John or someone else. Strong crossover rules help avoid such confusion by placing the pronoun in a position where it clearly doesn't refer to the noun in a conflicting way.
So, like, if I want to study strong crossover, where can I find it? Like, what topic or what book or has this thing?
Sorry, I'm having issues right now. Our systems are experiencing heavy load. Please try again later.
I was asking if I wanted to study the concept of strong crossover in detail, where can I find it? Like, what topic does this relate to? What is this subtopic of, or any book which can help me get the idea?
To study the concept of strong crossover in detail, you should look into syntax and generative grammar. Strong crossover is a topic within the study of syntactic theory, particularly in the context of binding theory and the interaction between syntax and semantics. A good place to start is the book The Syntax of Natural Language, An Introduction by Wolfgang Sternefeld. It covers various syntactic phenomena, including strong crossover. For more advanced and detailed discussions, you might also refer to Syntax, A Generative Introduction by Andrew Carnegie. Both texts provide comprehensive insights into the rules and theories of syntax, including strong crossover.
All right. So first assertion is that strong crossover occurs when the pronoun is in an argument position. That is, it is an argument of the relevant verb and is not contained inside a noun phrase. Like, for example, John said that he is smart, and John, he is smart is confusing. The second assertion is that weak crossover occurs when co-referential reading is marginal. That is, when the co-referential reading is not clearly unacceptable but is rather unlikely to occur. Here, the expression that has been crossed over may be a possessor inside a noun phrase. Now, I want you to elaborate what the second assertion really means.
second assertion about weak crossover means that this phenomenon involves situations where a pronoun or referring expression can have an ambiguous or less clear co-referential relationship with another noun or noun phrase, but it's not outright impossible or unacceptable. For example, in a sentence like, John said that his brother likes him, weak crossover might occur if him could be read as referring to John or someone else, but it's less clear or less likely. The term weak suggests that the crossover situation is not as clear-cut or definite as with strong crossover, where the co-reference is more obviously problematic. In weak crossover, the crossing over involves elements like possessors within noun phrases, making the reference less directly conflicting, but still potentially confusing.
So here the expression that has been crossed over may be a possessor inside a noun phrase. Now, please elaborate this with a relevant example, and what is that one element which is being crossed over, and a possessor inside a noun phrase. Please go ahead and explain those specifics of this statement.
Certainly. In weak crossover, the issue typically arises when the pronoun's reference is unclear but not impossible. Let's break it down with an example. Consider the sentence. John talked about his brother's picture of himself. Here's how it works. Possessor inside a noun phrase. In this sentence, his brother's is the possessor within the noun phrase, his brother's picture. Crossed over element. The pronoun himself is intended to refer to someone, potentially John or another person, but because of the structure, it creates some ambiguity. In weak crossover, himself might be ambiguous because it's not clear if it refers to John or someone else. The term weak indicates that while the ambiguity exists, it doesn't cause a definitive confusion or ungrammaticality, but rather creates a less clear interpretation.
All right, moving on to the next question. So, an optional rule proposed to handle the way constituents permute in free word order languages and which may be stylistic in nature is scrambling, of course.
Yes, that's correct. Scrambling refers to a linguistic phenomenon where constituents or parts of a sentence are reordered in free word order languages. It's often used for emphasis or stylistic reasons, rather than strictly adhering to grammatical rules.
Now, the next question, what you are is a fool. This is an example of a pseudo cleft sentence.
It sounds like there might have been a typo in your question. Could you clarify or provide more details?
So, in the sentence, what you are is a fool, this is an example of a pseudo cleft sentence.
Yes, that's correct. In the sentence, what you are is a fool, the structure highlights the information what you are as the focus, with a fool being the complement. This is an example of a pseudo-cleft sentence, which emphasizes the specific information or focus by splitting the sentence into two parts.
What's the difference between a pseudo cleft sentence versus a cleft sentence?
The main difference is in their structure and emphasis. A cleft sentence typically uses the structure it is was that, rest of the sentence. For example, it was John who ate the cake. The emphasis is on John, highlighting him as the focus of the sentence. A pseudo-cleft sentence, on the other hand, has the structure what focus is rest of the sentence. For example, what John did was eat the cake. Here, what John did is the focus, and was eat the cake provides more information about that focus. Both structures serve to emphasize different parts of the sentence, but they do so in different ways.
मेरा दिल तू लिख ले आना तू कर दे. All right, moving on to the next question. So, which of the following are not correctly matched? Case grammar, Fillmore. Conditions on transformations, Jack and Dove. Minimalist program, Chomsky. DP analysis, Abney. So, the one that is not correctly matched is case is
Here's a
conditions
quick
of.
rundown. Case is indeed a key concept in grammar. Film does not relate to conditions from transformations. This is actually more about linguistic theory. Jack and Dove isn't associated with the minimalist program. Instead, the minimalist program is related to Chomsky. DP analysis is indeed a part of minimalist program. So the mismatches are film with conditions from transformations and Jack and Dove with minimalist program.
Can you elaborate about the case grammar? About it was talked about by Fillmore, one of the options in the same question. So I want you to elaborate. When did he talk about the case grammar? What work did he talk about the case grammar into? And what really did he say? What really did he have to say about the case grammar?
Case grammar is a theory developed by Phil Moore, and it was introduced in the early 1960s. Moore proposed that sentences can be analyzed based on the roles or cases that nouns and pronouns play within them. For instance, in the sentence, she gave him the book, she is the giver, him is the recipient, and the book is the thing being given. In case grammar, Moore suggested that the structure of a sentence is understood through these semantic roles, rather than just syntactic arrangements. His work focused on how these roles interact within sentences and how they are essential for understanding meaning. This approach was influential in developing ideas about how different grammatical roles contribute to the overall sentence structure.
Now, about the conditions on transformation. So, was it Chomsky who worked on the conditions on transformations?
Yes, it was Noam Chomsky who worked extensively on conditions on transformations. In his work, particularly in the framework of transformational generative grammar, Chomsky explored how transformations, rules that rearrange sentence structures, can be applied. He developed principles to ensure that transformations produce grammatically acceptable sentences and adhere to constraints like the theta criterion, which regulates how arguments are assigned roles within sentences.
Now, what are the major highlights of the minimalist program?
The minimalist program, introduced by Noam Chomsky in the early 1990s, aims to explain the properties of natural language syntax with the simplest and most general principles. Here are the major highlights. 1. Universal grammar. The program builds on the idea that all human languages share a common underlying structure, which Chomsky calls universal grammar. This concept seeks to identify the innate principles that are universal to all languages. 2. Principles and parameters. It refines the principles and parameters model, focusing on reducing the number of parameters and principles needed to account for the diversity of languages. 3. Economy. The minimalist program emphasizes the principle of economy, which posits that linguistic structures are derived through the most efficient means possible, minimizing the use of additional rules or operations. 4. Merge. Central to the program is the operation merge, which combines elements to form larger structures. This operation is considered a fundamental building block in generating syntactic structures. 5. Derivation. It focuses on the derivation of sentences from simpler structures, emphasizing the role of transformations in this process. 6. Interface conditions. The program explores how syntax interfaces with other components of the language system, such as semantics and phonology, aiming to understand how these interfaces constrain syntactic structures. These highlights reflect Chomsky's goal of simplifying the theory of syntax while accounting for the complex diversity of natural languages.
And what about the DP analysis by Abney?
The GP analysis you're referring to might be the government and binding GB theory, which is a significant framework in generative grammar developed by Noam Chomsky. The government and binding theory, proposed in the 1980s, introduced several key concepts. One, government. This concept involves how different parts of a sentence, such as verbs and their arguments, interact and establish syntactic relationships. Two, binding. This focuses on how pronouns and other referring expressions are linked to their antecedents in a sentence. Three, X-bar theory. GB theory includes X-bar theory, which provides a detailed structure for how words combine into phrases and sentences. Four, transformations. The theory discusses various transformations that can change the structure of a sentence, such as moving elements around to form questions. Five, syntactic categories. GB theory categorizes different elements of syntax and their functions, helping to explain the structure of sentences in various languages. If GP analysis refers to something specific by another author or in a different context, let me know.
I said DP analysis, one of the options mentioned in the same question. DP analysis, D as in dog and P as in parrot. So DP analysis by Stephen Abney.
DP analysis, proposed by Stephen Abney, focuses on the idea that determiner phrases, DP, are the fundamental unit of analysis for noun phrases in syntax. Here are the major points. 1. Determiner phrase, DP. Abney suggested that the structure of noun phrases, NPs, should be analyzed as determiner phrases. In this view, the determiner, like the or a, is the head of the phrase, not the noun itself. 2. Structure. According to DP analysis, a noun phrase consists of a determiner and a noun, where the determiner is the core of the phrase. For example, in the cat, the is the head of the DP. 3. Functional projection. This approach posits that DPs are a type of functional projection, meaning that they serve a grammatical function in sentences, like specifying definiteness or quantity. 4. Universal grammar. DP analysis contributes to the understanding of universal grammar by showing how different languages can have similar structures for noun phrases, even if the overt forms differ. Abney's work highlighted the role of determiners in syntax and provided a framework for analyzing noun phrases more consistently across languages.
What was the first point that you just mentioned?
The first point is that determiner phrase DP is the fundamental unit of analysis for noun phrases in syntax. In this view, the determiner, like the or a, is considered the head of the phrase, not the noun itself.
All right, moving on to the next question. From the lexical relationship point of view, the word flower is said to have the following relation with the word tulip. So it has hypernym, hyponym, a synonym, homonym. Now the answer could either be hypernym or hyponym. So it's very confusing. Why do they have to put such questions? Like the from the lexical relationship point of view, the word flower is said to have the following relationship with the word tulip, right? So what am I supposed to understand with this information? Like, are you asking me the what the flower is, or are you asking me what the tulip is? You don't mention it. Now how the fuck am I supposed to answer that thing? All right, now let's focus here. So flower is the hypernym. I'm sorry. Yes, flower is the hypernym, whereas tulip is the hyponym. Now if I answer hyponym, so let's talk about tulip. Okay, so flower has the what relation with tulip? Well, tulip is the hyponym, flower is the hypernym. So the word flower is said to have this relation with the word tulip. That's the hypernym. So let's answer what flower is. Let's see. No, actually the answer is hyponym. Go fuck yourself, NTA, net motherfucker. Now moving on to the next question. What is a term used by many linguists to refer to language used for establishing an atmosphere or maintaining social contact rather than exchanging information or ideas? So, what is the term used by many linguists to refer to the language used for establishing an atmosphere or maintaining social contact rather than exchanging information or ideas? Is the Fatic Communion, Bronislaw Malinowski. Next question. Developed as a branch at mathematical logic and approach for formal account of the meanings of legitimate expressions, to account, to give a formal account of the meanings of legitimate expressions in a language is not mentioned. So given options are model theonetic semantics, prototype theory, lexical semantics, Montag grammar, Montague, Montag grammar. What
For the
hell?
first question, the term used to refer to language used for establishing an atmosphere or maintaining social contact rather than for exchanging information or ideas is phatic communication. For the second question, the branch of mathematical logic that provides a formal account of the meanings of legitimate expressions in a language is model theoretic semantics.
No, bitch, that's not. What's prototype theory then? What is prototype theory? Hello.
Prototype theory is a concept in cognitive science and linguistics that suggests categories are organized around a prototype or best example of that category. For instance, in the category of bird, a robin might be considered a prototype, while a penguin is less typical. This theory posits that members of a category are more or less typical based on how closely they resemble the prototype.
All right. What's Montag grammar? One of the options mentioned in the same question. Montague, Montag grammar.
Montague grammar is a theory developed by Richard Montague that combines formal logic with linguistic theory. It aims to provide a precise way to describe the semantics of natural languages using the tools of formal logic. The goal is to represent the meanings of sentences in a formal system that can handle both syntax and semantics.
So, what exactly is Montag grammar in simpler terms?
Montague grammar is a way to describe how sentences in natural languages mean what they do using formal logic. It treats sentences like math problems, where we can break down their structure and meaning in a precise, systematic way.
So it deals with language as a mathematician would deal with math, right?
Exactly. Montague grammar uses mathematical tools and logic to analyze and represent the meaning of sentences in a structured and precise way. It treats language like a formal system, similar to how a mathematician would approach problems.
So the question says that developed as a branch of mathematical logic and approach for a formal account of the meanings of legitimate expressions in a language is, as you say, model theonetic semantics. But now I'm confused if it's model theonetic semantics or Montague grammar or Montag grammar.
The question is referring to model theoretic semantics. Montague grammar is indeed a type of model theoretic semantics, as it applies the principles of mathematical logic to understand and represent meaning in language. So while Montague grammar uses model theoretic semantics, the broader term you should go with is model theoretic semantics.
When was the Montag grammar proposed? When was this proposed?
Montague grammar was proposed in the late 1960s. Richard Montague an American logician, introduced it around this time to formalize natural language semantics using tools for mathematical logic.
In which work did he propose this model of language explanation?
Richard Montague introduced his grammar in his 1970 work titled Universal Grammar, and his later work, English as a Formal Language. These publications laid the foundation for Montague grammar and its approach to semantics.
Chandan Shivam PhD.
हाँ बेटा, यूट्यूब पे लाइव हूँ। क्या कर रहा है?